Hi everyone, welcome to THT, and today is the final Lawless time first impression reviews, when I'm gonna go through the rest of the spoilers. So obviously there's gonna be a lot of filler cards in there, so I'm gonna try to go over them as quickly as possible as I'm evaluating every card in the context of Premier competitive play. And at the end of this video, I will also give my overall impression about the set, and at least my first impression about the set as a whole, and what are the pros and the cons and the things that I like, the things that I don't like about it, at least from what I'm seeing right now. Big thanks to Card Market for sponsoring this video. As usual, I'm rating all the cards in 4 criteria. I'm either not excited, not sure, I think the card is likely to be good, or the card is likely to be amazing. And when I'm not excited about a card, it doesn't mean the card is necessarily unplayable. It just means that the card is either bad or it's very, very niche. So, without further ado, let's get into the video with the first card. It is the leader Chewbacca. So, very interesting leader, as it is a leader that has an epic action, but you have to actually spend resources to put him on in play. One of the great things about the reason why leaders are so powerful in Star Wars Limited is because they are essentially free units. Obviously, Chewbacca makes up for this with amazing stats. Normally, whenever you deploy on 4, you are expected to get about 7 stats worth for resources deployment. This one has 11, so that's basically 4 more stats. Basically, you're paying, for every resource you're paying to deploy this leader, you get an extra bonus stats, which may not sound amazing. Paying 1 to get just a +1 stat on a unit is not great, but I think Chewbacca reaches a point where his stat line is just so high for the stage of the game that obviously a 4 or 5 6 for 4 is nothing, is not even close to anything we've ever seen, and there's simply just not many answers to this, especially against leaders. Against unit, there's always options, right? There's always certain cards you can play to get it off the board, but Chewbacca, there's just not many answers to it. I guess you could play Condemn, but outside of Condemn, there's not really many answers to a 5/6 Chewbacca that early in the game. And this by itself can just slap for a lot of damage, even though that is your entire turn doing that. So that's a big inconvenience. So he's a very interesting, very unique leader. He has an ability that basically allow you to destroy your own resource to deal damage to units. And once again, is the idea of kind of going all in. Because the thing is, like, you can defeat resources that have been exhausted. So you can spend the resources first, playing a unit, and then essentially recycle those exhaust resources into damage on enemy units, and then create credit tokens. But you do have to spend 1 resource to use that ability, though. So the ability is quite strong, be able to deal damage to a unit and create a credit token. The credit token, of course, is here to make up for the fact that you've lost a resource. Overall, I think that so the 5/6 on 4 deploy is kind of interesting. It's kind of a big gamble. If your opponent does not have an easy answer to Chewbacca, it's amazing, because then you get to slap that's your entire turn doing that, but it's a lot of damage that you're slapping every turn, and of course you're also saving cards by doing this, and then he also has a non-attack ability that can be also very powerful. However, if your opponent does have an answer for it, then the card becomes really bad, because you spend your entire turn and just got answered, and that was basically your deployment turn here. Thankfully, there's just not many answers to it at the moment. Even Condemn is a half answer, because in red, you expected to play Outer Rim Constable, which will get rid of the upgrades. So even there is not like a real clean answer. So I think in this context, Chewbacca can be quite decent. The other thing that makes me think that Chewbacca can be potentially good is the amount of synergies that they have with other cards. So I'm mostly thinking about cards like Sham Syndulla, where you sacrifice your own resource, but then you play Sham Syndulla using credit tokens, and you essentially get to ramp and you basically get to get your resource back, which is pretty great. You can also do the exact same thing with Broken Horn. It's a bit more expensive, and also draws you a card if you have less fuel cards than your opponent. But once again, the redundancy makes the deck pretty consistent. And there's also a card like Kazuda Xiono that just get bonuses for having fewer resources than your opponent. I'm sure there's other cards that do this, but Kazuda is the most powerful one of them, I think. Get himself into a unit that can slap for 6 very consistently and has 6 health, so not easy to remove. So, and is perfectly in color with Chewbacca. So, yeah, I think it's a leader that is worth testing. It's very, very unique, so it's very difficult to know in advance whether it's going to see play. That's why I'm not going to take the risk. I'm going to say this is a maybe for me. Definitely going to require testing to see if this is good or not, but there's definitely potential there. Moving on, we got Krrsantan, the new a new 7/7. So 7/7 ambush overwhelm is very powerful. We know this from basically Darth Maul from Shadow of the Galaxy, that being able to ambush and deal a bunch of overwhelm damage can be an excellent finisher. And Krrsantan does just that. The only difference, he does have a way for him that you can discard 2 cards from your game to kind of replay him. That can be a very powerful ability if you want to kind of reuse them after you attack with them. I think you're very rarely going to use that. I think most 99% of the time it's just a 7/7 ambush overwhelm. The major issue I have with Krrsantan is his cost. It costs 8 resources. That means that even for a finisher, if you're playing an aggro deck, you rarely get to 8 as an aggro deck. So it's going to be a tall order to get in there. So I'm going to give this one a maybe. I think in the new world of Premier, there's very few cards. Currently, one of the things that aggro decks kind of lack are really good ways to finish game. We don't have finishers such as 4 cards I believe in anymore. So Krrsantan gives you kind of this finisher ability that I think is very valuable for an aggro deck. With that being said, it's a conditional finisher because your opponent does need to have a unit in play on the ground, and it's a finisher that costs 8 resources, which is a lot. So not the best one, but it is unique and it does a job that no other cards does, and for that reason alone, I'm willing to give it the benefit of the doubt. Moving on to Everyday Moral Lies, which basically makes both players discard a card. Right now, there's a couple of discard synergies, but very little overall. So I find this card to not be good enough right now, but it is a card that can potentially be powerful in the right build with in the right archetypes. So that's why I'm giving right now it's not good, but and I'm judging card with the current card pool. But maybe in the future that'll be decent. A card that definitely a card that is not good right now, but you kind of have to keep on the back of your head that this does exist. Then we got the Broken Horn, which we talked about, which is basically the new Sham Syndulla in space. Costs 1 more, but can potentially make you draw a card. Not as good as Sham Syndulla, and I think Sham Syndulla overall has become a lot worse in the new set because obviously a ramp is not nearly as common as it was in the previous Premier format. I think it's playable with. I don't think it's good overall. I think if you're gonna be looking for that kind of thing, you'd much rather be playing Sham Syndulla. And also the color restriction is gonna make it even more difficult to play. With that being said, it is quite strong with the new Chewbacca, and for that reason, I'm gonna give this one a maybe. Then we got Bith Brute. I think the 4/3 stat line is actually not a bad stat line. There's not that many 3/3s for 2s in the current meta. 2 4s for 2s are way more common, and Bith Brute does trade with them really well. Having Sentinel is obviously very good in a color combination that doesn't have access to many Sentinels. And icing on the cake, it is Saboteur, which means that it will also do really well against the 2/2 shielded, which are also quite common between the Krennics and the Secretive Sage. So basically, this 3 drops basically trade really well with the vast majority of the 2 drops force units that you can see. So for that reason, I think I'm giving to give the thumbs up. I think this card really does well against most of the 2 drops in the game, and stay alive at the same time. And even in later stage of the game, I think the 4/3 Sentinels can really block the opponent. So I think it's a good card. Moving on, we got Droid Laser Turrets, which is very reminiscent to a card we know and love, the Village Protector. It's slightly worse because it has 1 less HP, which makes it very vulnerable to leaders like Aura Singh or Talzin. But but against pretty much everybody else, having 1 health really doesn't make a big difference. And this card is pretty much a Village Protector, but a Village Protector that is available for villainy. So I think if you're playing a control deck, you very much want to consider playing Droid Laser Turrets. It will give you a very sticky, annoying Sentinels that against certain decks can be really tough to deal with. So I really like this card. Moving on, it also is a droid which has some good synergy, as we know. Moving on, we got Hona. And this card is also really good. Basically 3/5 for 4. Raid 2 is basically almost a 5/5 for 4. It's not bad. It's not terrible for a starter, but then it has Restore 2, which means that whenever this thing swings, it creates a differential of HP of 7, which is pretty impressive. It is a 4-drop with no immediate impact on the game, but I think that in a meta where space aggro decks are very common, having a unit like this that you can play and create such a massive differential of HP whenever it swings is going to be quite valuable to have. It also is Underworld and Bounty Hunter, which are 2 relevant traits, so I think this is good, likely to see some play. Moving on, we got another legendary. This is Maz Kanata. Very, very cool design. Unfortunately, this design is squandered by the fact that it has horrible stats for 5 drops, a 4/4 for 5. Extremely vulnerable. Unfortunately, it combines this those very bad stats with the fact that it doesn't have an immediate impact on the game. So whenever a card does not have an immediate impact on the game, and has also bad stat, I mean it's very, very vulnerable until the point where it gets to attack. Obviously, in order to pay off for this, our ability is quite powerful, but it is also quite limited. It's basically a triple dark raid effect that digs down to 5 cards, which is not very deep. And search for Underworld units. Underworld, fortunately, is a very, very common trait. Get to play the card with 4 less instead of 5 less compared to triple dark raid. And the card, you don't get it back into your hand, it goes to the bottom of the deck. So significantly weaker effect than triple dark raid. And you get to attack with it, which is far from guaranteed. So on surface level, the card is quite weak, but there's quite a few powerful cards you can pull out of this. So obviously the idea is you play the card, you do a lot of prayer to make sure it to make it survive. And if it does survive, you get to swing with her. And then she can be quite powerful. So what are the cards you can pull? The Maul is a very good one. You're going to have to pay aspect penalty, but even if you pay aspect penalty, she's be down to 9. 9 minus 4 is 5, so you still be able, if you untap with Maz, and then you attack, you still be able to pull Maul, and then Maul gets to attack something, can kill 2 things, and take control of something, you can win the game on that. Synarra-san is another very powerful card you can pull. If this card comes to play ready, it's going to be hidden, will ready some resources when it's on attack, and it will only cost 3 after the Maz Kanata attack, which likely leave you with 4 resource. If you have multiple friendly units, that's even more that you can ready. Synarra-san, unfortunately, is not a great card in general, but in this particular context, whenever you get to play it ready, it can be really powerful, especially since it has hidden. Your opponent will not be able to ambush into it, will not be able to kill it with units before it gets to attack. Boba Fett is another one that can be quite nice. You get the huge resource discount, which lets you unit that comes to play ready that have both a when play and on attack are very powerful because you get to trigger the ability 2 times and completely just delete the board of your opponent, which completely delete, but like deal a bunch of damage. It's very, very strong. And in the similar vein than Synarra-san, you also got the Jabba Rancor, a 7/7 hidden, but on attack that will deal 7 damage to a unit. Very, very powerful card to have come into play ready. That is also Underworld. And finally, we also got the new L337. This one also would have to be played out of aspect. But if you do, unless you're playing it in Sol Guerrera yellow, I guess, then that would work. But then L337 will basically get you a bunch of droids. L337 will go back at the bottom of the deck, but the droids that she pulled won't. We're going to talk a little bit later about L337, but basically this is a card that has a really cool, fun potential. Unfortunately, I believe that, realistically speaking, in a game of Star Wars Limited at a competitive level, I don't think you're very likely to be able to pull it off. Once again, if there's a way to give Maz Kanata ambush, like consistently, I could see her being definitely better. Maybe that's supposed to go in some sort of Dryden Voss deck. Maybe in a Dryden Voss deck that can work. The problem is the other problem that I didn't talk about that I think is quite problematic as well, on top of her being quite fragile, is the fact that she needs to survive the attack for this to actually work. So you need to actually ambush into something, and she will have to survive from it. And then she also has to dig 5 cards. So finding those key cards within five deep into your deck is not going to be super easy. And keep in mind that all these cards are kind of worthless taken in separation. I think if she ever sees play, it's likely to be in a Droid yellow deck. But I just think it's just kind of seems to be a little bit too cute. It doesn't seem to be something that you can pull off consistently in a competitive game. There's just too many unknown, too many circumstances that need to happen, too many things that need to happen for this to work. And I think that's going to be a massive issue. Moving on to the last leader that got spoiled to us, it is Tobias Beckett, a very, very weird leader that basically you give control to one of your friendly units to your opponent in order to get a credit token. And so very weak leader ability. However, his leader deploy is quite powerful. It defeats all the units that you previously given to your opponent. You kill them off, and then you create credit tokens, and you get to draw a card as well. So that's a pretty powerful effect whenever it deploys. So the big question you might ask yourself is, why in hell would you ever play Tobias Beckett when you can play Director Krennic? Director Krennic, much easier condition. You just defeat your own unit to create credit tokens. You also get a bonus for defeating your own units to provide credit tokens. Another problematic with Tobias is obviously the fact that he's not heroism nor villainy, and as I said many times, until FFG gives us a set that really truly supports neutral leaders, leaders that are not heroism and villainy are missing out on so many powerful cards that it's just a big inconvenience, and you really need to be very, very powerful to make up for the fact that you're missing heroism and villainy. And there's currently not enough powerful non-heroism and non-villainy card to really make a deck out of it, I feel like. So this is kind of the main problems here with Tobias is, so I think the advantage that he has over Krennic is obviously his deployment. His deployment is really the bread and butter of the deck. The way you're supposed to play him, I think, is that you are going to be playing a bunch of very, very weak units that you're going to be giving out to your opponents. Things like Porgs, Escape Pods, only free tap. And that means you're basically playing no unit before turn 4, because as soon as you play a unit, your opponent can simply just use the unit that it was given to him and then suicide it against the unit you just played, which defeats the purpose of giving them at the first place. I mean, you do get credit tokens, but you spend an entire turn doing that, so it's not really that good. If you compare this to obviously cards like Lando Calrissian or Krennic, just getting a credit token out of a unit is not really enough. You got to get something else out of it as well. But obviously it all comes into play whenever you actually deploy the leader, and then you get to actually kill off those units that you've given to your opponents, and then you get to get some real payoff. So that's pretty interesting. I don't really think that works in practice, because having to play no units in the first 4 turns in the game is not something that is easy. I mean, yes, you can play removals, but that also means you also need to spend resources playing those units as well. So that's the problem here, is like, not only do you have to play those units that you have to give out to your opponent to really get some value out of the Tobias deployment, you also have to play removal to defend yourself. And having to do both of these things at once is very, very difficult. So this is the problem. The other problem that we are facing here with Mr. Tobias is the fact that in that color combination, there's just simply not a whole lot to ramp into. The whole point, of course, is to get a bunch of credit tokens. You get your credit tokens whenever you're using the ability, and then you get your credit token again whenever you're deploying Tobias. And the idea is to use those credit tokens to play something that's going to pull you very far ahead. And unfortunately, as it stands, there just simply is not enough of very powerful payoffs in those colors. And you really have to play out of aspect to really get some good cards, but then they become outrageously expensive, defeating the purpose of producing credit token in the first place. So good cards you can play out of him is obviously the Purgle Kings. Lando Calrissian is a good one, because you're going to have a whole bunch of useless units you can kind of make your opponent capture to heal yourself up. There's obviously the new mass removal that we'll talk about a little bit later. And there's obviously Finn, which is, in my opinion, one of the best cards you can play in that color combination. But those cards are good stabilizers. Purgle King gives you some restore. Lando Calrissian heals you. Detonation wipes the board, then kills you something and can give you a bit of a board presence, but none of those cards are win conditions. So unfortunately, I don't feel like there's enough meat and enough like a good late game. It's already very difficult. I feel like for a regular control deck to really find good closer and good win conditions. It feels like with Tobias, it's gonna be even more difficult. Let me know if I'm missing anything about this leader. It is definitely a very unique design, and I'm ready to think that there might be other ways to use him. But that's currently my first impression about it. Once again, those are first impression videos. They're not meant to be an extensive analysis of the leader, which would require me to play with them, which I haven't done so far. So overall, what's my first impression about Tobias? I don't think it's good. I think there's just too many things that needs to go right for this to work. I cannot see a world where this is good. At least with the current card pool. So we'll see how it goes. What is very frustrating is like I think the idea of the leader is very interesting, but FFG simply hasn't given us any support for that leader really. Like we should obviously, as I said earlier, leaders that are not heroism or villainy I just don't have enough support in general. I think the FFG should have dedicated an entire set to it to really make the idea work. Another thing that I think they should have done is giving cards that actually gives you bonuses for when you give them to your opponent. Whenever you actually donate them, like basically maybe units that have very powerful downsides, and then when you give them to your opponent, you actually give them something that you're gonna have to deal with for the rest of the game. That would be much more interesting to go about it, but there's no such unit in the game, at least not enough of them for this to really work. So this is a big problem. So it's an interesting concept, but unfortunately not supported enough, which is a problem with many things in Star Wars Unlimited. Is just they just pull out those great ideas, but they don't support them, so they don't see any play, and they end up just not mattering, which is very frustrating. Then we got Two-Face Strong. So this card is a card that you can give control to your opponent to get some bonus, but then your opponent gets a 2/4 Sentinels, so that's a big deal. 2/4 for 3 is playable. It's basically a Cloud City guard, so this is semi-playable. But then you have the option of instead of giving it instead of playing as a 2/4 Sentinels, is giving to your opponent just creates a bunch of credit tokens, which I think is pretty decent. It's a pretty flexible card that can be used as a defensive purpose or to ramp depending on the situation, which I think is pretty nice. I don't think it's particularly good in Tobias, but I think in general, I think it's a card that could see play if you are aiming to play a sort of deck like this that uses those colors and are kind of like want to create some kind of ramp. Moving on, we got Val. So Val is an interesting concept again. So she is one of those cards that you can give it to your opponent using Tobias, and in order to benefit from the when defeated and give a shield or whatever. So you can actually deploy and then give a shield to your leader, which is nice. The problem is like you're not really benefiting from the when played, because Val, I don't like basically 2-drops that are require another unit to actually work, because then you can't really play them on turn 1, which is the entire point of being a 2-drop in the first place. So the when playability is just a little bit awkward, and then when your opponent defeats it, then it's even more awkward. So it's a bit difficult to use. I can't see. I don't think it's unplayable. There might be cases where you can play it, but the downside of having it's giving a shield to an enemy when it dies is just very big inconvenient. And if you play just I guess you can just play that to 2/4 for 2, but there's already so many 2/4 for 2s with upside in the game right now. Why would you play a card like this that has a downside? So yeah, she's just a little bit awkward to use, and she doesn't combine particularly well with Tobias because you're not really giving a shield, because then you are giving out a 2/4 to your opponent that's going to beat you down. Ideally, with Tobias' ability, you want to give out units that have no stats or like just can't attack at all. So then you don't die before you get to deploy your leader, because you're already going to be struggling to play removals because you are spending resources on those units. You can't afford on top of that to be giving out units that actually give stats. And here's the upside of giving a shield, it's just very small. Moving on, we got the Rhydonium Detonation. So this is the card, the other mass removal that they were going to be printing in the set. In fact, it's the first time that we have 2 mass removals being printed in the same set. And I believe this one is quite good. It comes into play a turn earlier than the notorious Super Laser Blast, or the Ignition, the Super Laser Ignition that we had which is the new Super Laser Blast that we got. It comes into play one turn earlier, but it has a couple of downsides. The first downside is like it doesn't affect leaders, which is a pretty big deal. Because being able to kill leaders is going to be super important in the set, as there's also a few things that actually do kill leaders. So you really need to have things that can kill leaders. The other major inconvenience is that both players get to return a card from the opponent's hand, so you're not making as much card advantage as you would with a regular Super Laser Blast. But it does come into play one turn earlier, which is a very big deal. Obviously, what's going to limit strongly how often this card is going to see play is going to be the color combination. So I do believe overall it is worse than the Super Laser Blast, but it is close enough in power level that I would definitely want to play this in a control deck if I was going to be playing in those colors. This could be a great boost to Thrawn Yellow Control, which already used the Legacy run as a way to wipe the board. This is going to be another options available to them. And another thing that I really like is... obviously, you can play it in any control deck by playing that to 27 HP base, and you can play this ignoring the aspect penalty on top of the other Super Laser Blast. So you basically have two 6 Super Laser Blast effect in your deck, which is kind of crazy. Overall, I'm going to give this a thumbs up. I need to test it to figure out how big of an inconvenience are those downsides. Definitely the one that you can't kill a unit is a problem. But I think that if you played like if you play like something like a Condemned on it. Another thing that is interesting is like it's a wipe effect that is available to Heroism. So Heroism, this could enable some sort of Heroism control deck. The problem is like Heroism is lacking early game removal. Cards such like Condemn and No Glory Only results are extremely important for control to exist on the villainy side of things. So I believe that it's going to be very difficult for an Heroism deck to exist without those removals, unfortunately. Moving on now to the new R337. Definitely one of my favorite cards that has been spoiled. Reminiscent, of course, of U-Wing Reinforcement. That as you know, is one of my favorite cards of all time. This card is basically does this sort of U-Wing Reinforcement effect, but it brings up to cost 5 worth of units into play. On top of giving you a 3/2 hidden and cost only 6, but only works with droids. So the two major issues I have with this card is the first one is that obviously you need to be playing a lot of droids for this to work. Because as soon as you whiff, you start losing serious value, because a 3/2 hidden is worth, basically it's worth between 1 and 2 resources. There's some that are costed 2 resources, right? But they are pretty weak. So it's a bad 2 cost unit, basically. And then you get like 5 cost worth of units, so that's a total of 7. But that's a 7, so it's only a 1 resource discount compared to what you're paying for it. But that's obviously assuming you manage to use all of the resources you find enough droids. I think the big thing that makes this card a lot weaker than U-Wing Reinforcement is that there's strong possibility to whiff with that card. Or there's strong possibility to not find exactly what you need. And that's as compared to U-Wing Reinforcement, which gives you insane flexibility. So overall, I think this card is going to be quite risky to play. But if you play enough droids, it's a lot of value. It's a lot of, obviously, 3 units. Compared to U-Wing Reinforcement, which is limited to 3 units, R337 can actually bring any numbers of droid as long as the total cost is 5. So you can imagine bringing 2 true drops and 1 drops. That'll be 3 body on top of R337. That's 4 body for 6. So that could be, and there's some really good droid 2 drops in the game. Of course, you can combine this with something like a Providence, Invisible Hand, to kind of swarm the board with droids, and that can be very powerful. So maybe they're going to see play in Piet. It's definitely something I'm going to be willing to try. It's a very fun card to see, but I'm not sure if it's competitive enough. I'm too afraid that this might whiff, even in a Piet deck that do play a lot of droids. I'm afraid that this might not just get up the maximum value that you need from it every single time. Moving on, we got the Devaronian Doorbuster. On paper, the card is not bad. 3-2 restore 1, so it's really good at racing. It basically does a HP differential of 4 every time it attacks, and it does have Saboteur as well. The problem with the card like this is that currently, in the current meta, there's just so many 2-4 for 2s. The 2-4 for 2s is such a standard stat line now for 2 drops, and 3-2s obviously do horribly against 2-4s. And for that reason alone, I think that in order for 3-2 to be playable, it needs to be incredibly pushed, like, for example, Charismatic. Like, you need to be Charismatic level of OPness to be playable at the 3-2 for 2, and unfortunately, Devarnant's Doorbusters is not there. Okay, so now we are getting into the more like cards that are meant to be for limited, so I'll try to go a little bit faster on those. So yeah, 4-4-4-4, very bad stat line. The upside is not good enough to justify it. The Shield Driver Outfitter, very difficult, expensive, just to give a shield to a unit. The Bunta Eve Flag Bearer, it's basically restore with extra steps. What would you play this over? Something like an Owen Lars or a Moisture Farmer. So bad. Insanely overpriced. This is worse than Armor of Fortune. The ability is extremely weak. Only digs 1 card deep. That's barely anything. So basically, you're only playing this card just to get an health bonus. But then you much rather play Armor of Fortune, or even the Armor of Fortune is non-playable for. Armor of Fortune costs 2 though, but even then, that's just not good enough. Alkanzi Patrollers, just way too weak, doesn't actually block anything. Just a really bad card. Even TIE Fighters trade even with it, which is just horrible. We got the Vigilant Scouts. Not horrible, but simply just understat for 4 drop. So not good enough. Shield Hauler, it's so 5 drop with no immediate impact on the game. It's tough to kill, sure, but whatever. Syndicate Security, 4-6 for 5 is just not a great stat line, and Grid doesn't make up for it. So I just want to say that I'm talking about all these cards in the context of Premier. Obviously, in Limited, those cards will be much better, of course. Incapacitated one is a more of an interesting one. This is kind of like, it's pretty good in combination with Aura Sing, because you get to weaken a unit and then to kill it off, then you can basically kill something that's 3 HP for 2 resource, which is not bad. It's basically kind of knowledge and defense, but the advantage is that in a control deck you can play this in turn 1. On turn 1 you don't get to draw the card, but that's fine. So I think it might see play. I think it's definitely a card I would consider in a control Aura Sing deck. Pirate Snob Fighter is, if you're in a meta where there's a lot of Vader, the 2/3s can actually kill a lot of 1-drop, like the A-Wings, like the 2/1 fighters, or even like the simple. So this could be a good sideboard card. The problem is, like, it's very narrow. It only really truly works against Vader Swarm, Vader Pilot. Against any other archetype, the stat line is just too weak to be able to kill anything, which makes the card pretty bad. Bruce's Duo, just not great stats, requires another unit to be in play, and only works on the ground, too situational, and very weak stats. Follow of the Code, 2/3s, so 2 has never been a good stat line for a 2-drop, and the Restore 1 doesn't make up for it. Same here, we got some 2/3 red ones in the previous Premier format. I never saw play. I don't see any reason why this would see more play after rotation. We got the Gateway Freighters. This one is a bit more interesting. It's kind of like a worse version of Lady Proxima, because it's the same purpose, right? It's a card that's going to produce credit tokens every turn. This one does require a ground units to actually work. So there's a condition. It's easier to basically stop for the opponent. But if you basically open up with a ground unit, then play this card, and then on the turn after, let's say your opponent kills your 2-drop, then you play another ground unit, it's not so easy to stop that. And this will produce you credit tokens every day. So the big question is, why would you ever play Gateway Freighter when you get access to Lady Proxima, or even better, the Max Rebo Band? Well, the simple reason is because if you don't play yellow, I know, for example, Piet is currently playing the 27 HP base in order to play the Max Rebo Bands and Lady Proxima. if I was a Piet deck, I would strongly consider running a 30 HP base and run the Gateway Freighter instead. Uh, Unfortunately, it's only one of them, while they come in pair, which is nice. But there's an argument for it. It's unlikely to see play because it's really worse than Proxima and Reboban, but it's not unplayable, and I think I can see a world where this could see play. Then we got the Target Tagger, which is basically a carbon copy of Fleet Lieutenant, but instead of working for Rebels, it works for Bounty Hunter. Obviously, it is worse because Bounty Hunter is not as common of a trait that a Rebel, but there is a Bounty Hunter archetype that I think is quite competitive, and this card would definitely be very strong in that, so I'm going to give this one a thumbs up. Moving on, we got Eden Hunters. Decent stats, but Eden is kind of irrelevant for a unit like this, way too slow for constructed. Partisan U-Wing, insanely understats, and the ability is quite situational. Then we got Smuggler, YT2400. It is just a worse version of Blue Ace, but obviously it's a different color combo, but I just think that this Statlines ambush is just a bit overpriced. The idea of playing the card like this would be to ambush into 2/4s, to kill them off, but the 2/4s come into play usually on turn 2. This comes 2 turns later, which is just way too late. You can spend an extra resource and then it becomes a 5/6, which will let you ambush stuff like ATLer, which is a pretty big deal, but that comes into play once again way too late for this to be a thing. Profiteers Hunter, again, so just weak stat lines, very weak ability. You don't ever want to play something like this. The Mercenary Fleet's 9 drops with no immediate impact on the game. As much as there's just not as many removals they used to, it's just playing a 10-10 on 9 that does nothing else. It's just not something you want to do in any card game for that matter, let alone Star Wars Unlimited. 8/5 for 6. A 6 drop with no immediate impact on the game. It does put a lot of pressure, but it's just too easy to deal with only 5 health. Unless you are incredibly far ahead and your opponent plays no removal, it's just so easy to deal with. In fact, it's a 6 cost means it even can be dealt by Big Garret, so way too risky to play a card like this in Constructed. Accent Aggressor actually put up some really good punch for 2 drops. I can attack up to 4, but as soon as your opponent play anything, just a 3/3 or 2/4s, we'll be able to trade stay alive. And if you let that happen, you just fall behind so much. So it's obviously unplayable. Then we got a 4/5, and on attack, the base can't heal for this phase. The stat line is decent, and the ability can be used for a certain matchup. Turns out heals is very weak after rotation. Most of the good heals of the game have been rotating out. And not only that, usually whenever you had the fact that the ability only triggers on attack means that the opponent will have an opening to actually use his heal most of the time, which makes the effect a little bit useless. Moving on, Mid-Rim Sharpshooter. Horrible stats. You can pay extra to make your opponent discard a card. Not worth it. 7 drop with no immediate impact on the game. Too risky. 3/2 stat line, terrible. As long as we're going to have 2/4s as a standard stat line, 3/2s are just not good enough. And we got Inspired Recruit, which is basically Death Star Stormtrooper, but for heroism. And this card is pretty good because if you get into trying to build an aggro deck that has double 1-drop opening, pulling a 3/1 for 1 is one of the best things you can do and puts a tremendous amount of pressure on the opponent. There's a lot of ways to deal with 1 health unit in this meta, so I wonder if this is going to be really a strategy, but depending on how the meta evolves, I could see this being pretty powerful. Moving on, we got Severe Survivor, not a good 1-drop. And we got a Carven Angels X-Wing, not a great card on its own, but when you play this in a Thrawn deck and you get to deal 4 damage to base when it gets defeated, this becomes a lot more exciting. So I'm going to give this one a maybe, just because it's potentially very strong in Thrawn Red. I don't know if Thrawn Red is any good, I haven't tried it, but this could be a potentially powerful card in this deck if you're trying to build a Thrawn Red aggro. The problem with Thrawn Red is that it's a deck that really wants to be built as an aggro deck, and the problem is that Thrawn is a 6 deploy leader, 4/7, so not really a convincing card for an aggro deck, to say the least. Braca Shipbreaker, decent stats, but pretty bad ability. Ability that is pretty much irrelevant, so you are expecting. There's just way better 4/3s in this meta. 5/4/4 Saboteur, not unplayable, but I don't think this is good enough. Of a 5/4, you expect more than to do with a 5/4 usually for constructed. Salvage Blaster, pretty horrible upgrade, can be played from when it gets discarded, which is so incredibly situational. And the upgrade is not the kind of upgrade you would want to play. At least if you could play it for free, I guess that would be. Even if you could play this for free, it will still be probably not very good. Commence the festivities. If you are playing this in a Chewbacca deck, I think there's a way this card could be decent. It's almost guaranteed to be a +2 attack Saboteur, which currently is as good as it gets. And the fact that it only costs 1 in the context of Chewbacca deck that is usually going to be very restricted in resources actually does matter. So maybe it's playable in there. Daring Delve, basically, yeah, incredibly random. And you have no control over what you are going to get. And you're spending resources for that. Absolutely horrible card. Flash Defense is another of those buffs, a +2 Overwhelm. But if you attack the base, you have to defeat that unit. So it's very much a finisher card. Card you're going to try to use to finish the opponent off. But obviously, for that very purpose, you would much rather play Aggressive Negotiation. Every time you see those buffs in red that are trying to finish the game off, you have to weight it against Aggressive Negotiation. And the fact that Aggressive Negotiation costs basically 3 times the price is kind of irrelevant because you are usually playing this card to kind of finish the game off. In which case, you really don't care if the card, the cost of the card. And that's the reason why Aggressive Negotiation should be played relatively often out of aspect as well. The reason why I didn't compare this card to Aggressive Negotiation is because Commence the Festivities, I think in the context of Chewbacca deck, the fact that it costs only 1 makes a very big deal. Why Aggressive... So, moving on now to Collateral Damage. This card is kind of a bad version of Let's Call It War, but it does have the advantage of dealing damage to base, which is something that is extremely rare. After rotation, there's very few things that deals direct damage to base, which I think is a great design decision, especially if we're not going to get a lot of heal. With that being said, so yeah, I think you can deal the damage to base even if your opponent has no unit. This could be a way to finish the game off, like a Daring Raid. In which case, the fact that it's got a lot of, that it's cost 3 doesn't make a big difference. And obviously, sometimes it can just be like, Let's Call It War. So I think this card is quite decent. I'm gonna give this one a maybe. Onaka Gangstar Hopper, just undercosted. The Wookiee Guerrilla is pretty interesting. It's very similar to Grand Inquisitor as a 2/4 hidden, but when he attacks, hidden and raid is a pretty good combination because hidden means that the unit cannot be attacked when it comes to play, which means that the fact is a raid 2 as opposed to a 4/4 doesn't make that big of a difference. And you know you'll be able to swing at least once before this thing dies. And you can attack something and kill something. So this reminds me a lot of Grand Inquisitor. With that being said, I think the entire reason why Grand Inquisitor sees play is because he's a force unit, which is a pretty big deal. So overall, I'm going to give this one a maybe. I think it's unlikely to see play, but it has good stats, can kill units, and your opponent cannot interact with it. So this could be good in an aggro. I could see this card being played in an aggro Erosion deck. Cutthroat Pod Racer, a card for limited, bad stats, situational ability. Rebel Blockade Runner, decent stats for space units, but Saboteur is kind of meh. So 4-drop with no impact on the game is just too slow for constructed. Kenyan Frontrunner, 3/2 for 2 stat line, not good enough, and the ability doesn't make up for it. Then we got the 2 3/4/3s, Raid 2, stats are just weak, very weak, with only 3 health. And the Saboteur not super relevant. Before we get to the rest of the video, I just would like to let you know that you can pick up Victor Leader on card market for only €4.25, a card that I think will be very relevant in the upcoming meta. Moving on to the Guild Ambush team, which reminds me of the Syndicate Lackeys from the first set. It's exactly the same card basically. I think Syndicate Lackeys was Underworld, this one is Bounty Hunter. This card, it's been a long time since Syndicate Lackeys has been meta. It used to be pretty good in set 1 and a little bit in set 2 as well. Since then, it has fallen off a lot and doesn't see any play. There's just way better option nowadays. But obviously, with rotation happening, this could leave a bit of space for this card to maybe be decently good, as it trades really, really well with the 3/5s and stays alive. Another key factor I think that make this card potentially playable is the fact it's a bounty hunter, so it does combine really well with Boba Fett. Comes to play, kill something, creates the credit tokens, can be really nice. So I think if you're playing Boba Fett yellow, you're likely to be wanting to try this card. So this, for that reason alone, I'll give you this a maybe. The Milodon Rider, just too expensive. Not really doesn't really do a whole lot. It's probably going to be decent in draft, but not in constructed. Salvage material, extremely situational, and even when you do play it, it's very ineffective. And the fact that you have to defeat the upgrade after you play it is just insult to injuries. Like, why is it just? I mean, yeah, this card is just unplayable, I think. Circular Challenger would be decent in draft, but 4/5/4/5 doesn't cut it anymore in Star Wars Unlimited. 4/5/4/5 Ambush doesn't cut it anymore. The 5/5/5 Sentinels would be a pretty good card in draft. It's basically a Cruel Commandos, but doesn't have Overwhelm. But in constructed, this kind of cards is just not good enough. Hidden and Supplier, not a good card. Yeah, not a good card. Very low impact and quite expensive. The Criminal Contact, another low impact, very expensive card. It is a true neutral, so don't expect those cards to be playable. Most of the time, they're just basically they're basically meant to be draft fillers. Carver Heavy Fighter is no exception here. Horrible stats for 3 drops in space, and Overwhelm doesn't make up for this, not even close. The Bank Job Fugitive, again, too expensive for what it does. Kessel Hulk, thankfully there are better Sentinel options. Seasons Tracker, bad stats again, Hidden doesn't make up for it. Talking about Sentinels that actually might see play, so something I realized in this post-rotation, so basically all the good Sentinels in space are kind of leaving the format. The Mandalorian, the 1/4 that gain plus 2 attack when it gets attacked for 3, Sentinels rotating out. So is Bright Hope. So there's not a lot of good space Sentinels, and I feel like space Sentinels are going to be quite important. IGV 55 listener might see play in some control-y villainy deck, because in that price range there's simply just not a whole lot going on. You got Fleet Interdictor that is more expensive. That does make a big difference. This card basically does the same job as Fleet Interdictor, but for 1 cheaper. So, and then you got the Graceful Progress for 1 less. But the problem with Graceful Progress is that it doesn't really kill anything with his only 2 attacks. So it's only delaying. It's not really kind of dissuading the opponent from attacking as much as an IG-55 would do. So I can see this card potentially seeing some play. It's definitely something that you might want to try out in your villainy mid-range / control deck in order to improve your space matchup. Even though I believe that if you are playing blue, you just have a lot of good options to stop space aggro in general. I'm more worried about decks who don't have access to blue. The Vandal Range Trooper, decent stab for a 4-drop with no ability. If you compare this to a Long Pack, it's pretty sad. Long Pack was just giving so much more, and yet it was not a card that was... It was a competitive card, but this was not a card that was just seeing like a million play. Phoenix Squadron Fighters, just way too expensive. The resource reduction is very difficult. In order to make this card worth it, you will need to make it cost like 5, and that means you need to have 3 units that is damage in play for this to actually work. Often you get to do that, very rarely. Even if you play this in a Han 2 deck, it would be quite difficult to pull off, and even then it's just a 6/6 with no immediate impact on the game. Not a good card. And moving on, we got a couple of reprints. Street Gang Recruiter, the Alliance, the good old Alliance X-Wing. This actually might see some play, even though there's just not as many. There's not as much support for Rebels as there used to be. The Ricket Quad Jumper, and then the Prototype TIE Advance, which was from Jump to Light Speed, so it's already Premier legal. So yeah, I was expecting to see a lot more reprints. I'm very surprised that they've only decided to reprint so few cards, because obviously after rotation there's going to be so many cards that are going to rotate out, and I felt like there were like some cards that maybe they would want to reprint. So, and it's actually the thing I was looking forward the most. I know that at the end of the set they reveal more or less the draft fillers, so they're now the most interesting card. But I was expecting that the reprints would be a pretty big deal this time around because of the card that gets to stay in Premier Legal. So a bit disappointed and surprised that they haven't took that opportunity to reprint more cards and more powerful cards, obviously, because none of those cards will see play realistically. Even the Alliance X-Wing, as I said, most of the Rebel synergies are basically rotating out of the game. And here we go. We get into the conclusion of this video. As I did in every single of my spoiler videos, I've decided to kind of do a counting of the legendaries and kind of rank them. In what I think. So I've done some rearrangement because I got the chance to play with a lot of these cards. And I've decided to upgrade the Intimidator to a maybe because there's actually a pretty cool combo you can do with this card that makes this card potentially very powerful. Still not sure whether it's going to be good enough or not. More about this soon. I've decided also to downgrade the Persecutor. I'm still unsure about the Lawbringer. I feel like I've been overall very disappointed by the Star Destroyers, the legendary Star Destroyers. I think they don't pull their weight. They're just too situational because of they deal with White Bolt, but that's about it. I also decided to downgrade the Anakin Pod Racer. I definitely overrated that card. It's definitely a lot more situational than I thought. Yeah, so overall there's just a bunch of maybes, bunch of cards that I'm not sure if they're going to see play or not. The only thing that I'm quite confident we'll see play is the Liberty, the Stranger, Ray, and the Lawbringer. I'm even a bit hesitant on this one. And then the only card that really truly I think is going to be a real chase card for the set is the Reactor Ignition. So, as you can see, we've added quite a few cards at the bottom of the legendary here with Maz Kanata. At the bottom here, I put the R337 in the maybe list. Overall, those legendaries are not better than the one from the previous sets. So basically, Fantasy Flight Games told us that the legendaries they've acknowledged the fact that legendaries are too weak, and they've said that they were correcting this in the upcoming sets. They said that set 7 will have legendaries that are about the same power level as what we saw in Shadow of the Galaxy, and they also said that that the set 8 legendaries will be about the same power level as the one from Spark of Rebellion, which is quite a big statement to make because Spark of Rebellion are obviously some of the best legends in the game. So let's say if their statement is true at least for a Lawless time, and in my opinion it's not true. If you compare this is how I would rank the legendaries from using the same ranking system. This is how I would rank the legendaries from Shadow of the Galaxy. Obviously it's in hindsight ranking, but it basically shows you that even though there's actually a lot fewer legendaries, because back then there were only 16 legendaries, there were 4 legendaries fewer than in the newer sets. Despite the fact that they had 4 less legendaries, you can see that there's a lot more legendaries in the amazing categories, and there were actually some real chase cards in the set, like Krayt Dragon, Poe Dameron. DJ only got kind of revealed. The power level of DJ was got revealed really afterwards, but then even you could argue Supreme Snoke, Darksabers, and Kylo Talasancer was really, all those 6 cards were really chase cards. If you compare this to this set here, you're gonna have even Rey. Like, Rey is a strong card, but it's not gonna see play in a lot of decks. It's still like a fairly niche card. The Stranger is a powerful card, but only playable in triple aspect requirements. So is Reactor Ignition. So even the card that I put at the top of the hill, they're still gonna see less play compared to cards like fucking Krayt Dragon, which are literally can be played in any red deck. So I believe that the amount of chase card that you have in this set is not comparable to the one in Shadow of the Galaxy. So I believe that the statement from FFG saying that the legendaries of the sets are on the same power level as Shadow of the Galaxy I think the statement is incorrect. I don't think that's true. Once again, this is only first impression, so I could be wrong, and maybe some of those legendaries are going to be proving to be better than what I thought. There's still some legendaries in that categories which can easily be bumped up to the thumbs up depending on how they perform. But overall, I still believe that this is not going to fix the problem that we're having with legendaries. A bit more about this later. So overall, what is my impression here about a Lawless time, looking at the spoilers and having played the set a little bit for the past few weeks? What do I think about it? So first of all, I'm going to start with the positive. The positive is like, I think that both of the new mechanics that they brought to the table, so the triple aspect requirement cards, the double aspect requirement card that's basically in those different mechanics that allows you to play them ignoring aspect penalty. I think as well as the credit token mechanic, both of these mechanics I think are quite fun to play with. They're quite well balanced in my opinion, and they are going to be competitively relevant. So that's a very, very big positive points here for the set. So that's really, really nice. The second positive is that in terms of leaders, it is definitely a big step up over set 5 and set 6. One of the things that characteristic of set 5 and set 6 were that leaders were very, very weak. With very few exceptions. This set seems to have a decent amount of really playable leaders. So that's a really positive thing. Once again, it's only first impression, so that could be incorrect, but I think I believe this to be the case. Third thumbs up here is on the limited format. I think as opposed to sets 6, we had a limited format where layout was just a little bit over the top, especially in sealed. It feels like, once again, I haven't played limited, so this remains to be confirmed, but at least I'm looking forward for this limited set. I think the fact that we have those 27 HP base will allow us to play some random like 3 aspect requirements in our deck, which I think is really cool. So I think there's going to be a lot of interesting decision in terms of what color combination you're going to be playing, depending on those 3 aspect quad and which one you want to ignore the aspect penalty of. I think there's going to be some really, really interesting deck building decisions, and the leaders seems to be quite balanced for the purpose of limited. Again, that remains to be confirmed. Now into the negatives. So basically, I'm not a big fan of the way they've done the multicolor. I think it's okay, but I feel like they could have achieved much more if they fully committed to it. I believe that I would have been much more interested to see a set where there's a lot of double aspect requirement card with no heroism and no villainy. A lot more leaders like So Guerrera that has double aspect requirements, but the real supports behind them for them to become playable. They kind of half committed to it. They did a 50-50 where we got those double aspect requirements neutral that are coming out, and then you have those triple aspect requirements also going alongside it, requiring heroism and villainy. So I think they kind of half-ass it. I would have wanted them to commit on from one or the other rather than going half and half. I'm a little bit worried about the credit archetypes. In a vacuum, it's a really powerful archetypes and it works really well. But it seemed very balanced to me, and the problem is there's just so many counters across so many colors that is going to be very difficult. Basically, you got counters in yellow, you got counters in red, you get counters in blue. So unless you're playing green, you basically not... you're playing against modal green, you are basically submitted to potentially get blown out by those credit removal kind of thing, which I think is... I'm okay with having some counters, but here the amount of counters they printed is a bit overwhelming, and the fact that they are across so many colors is also a big problem. Like, it's a bit weird that we have only one color that has access to upgrade removal, which is red, and then we have 3 colors that have access to credit removal. That just doesn't make any sense to me. Despite 2 new good board wipes, which is the ignition and the other one, control is clearly lacking versatile top end and good cheap removals to be a thing. So this is 2 massive key ingredients that we are missing for control decks to really thrive, in my opinion. Is the cheap and good removals. We get condemned, but it's very, very easy to counter, and it's also only 1 card, unfortunately. And we don't that's a real problem. Like, Power Dark Side, I know a lot of people didn't like that card, but that card was absolutely essential for the ecosystem of the game. It really punished very cheesy play that otherwise just win the games on their own. And without that card, I'm a little bit scared that thankfully we got the 3 Remember, which is kind of a more balance to kind of punish that. But I would have wanted to see some good turn 1 removal that we can play and be happy about them. Maybe not on the same power level as Power Dark Side, but still something that would have worked. I think the big criticism that I'm making is that post rotation we are really lacking good top end. Like for some reason FFG just doesn't want to print good late game cards. We got some really amazing late game cards in set 1 with Avenger and Devastator. But since then, very few good top ends. We got the new Devastator from Jump to Speed, which is quite strong, but it is more of a mid-range / aggro card in my view because of the ability to deal damage to base. Not really something that you meant in a control deck in my view, even though we are forced to play it in control decks because there's simply nothing else. Like there's simply just we got 2 new spaceships in this deck in this format, which basically do the exact same thing, which is dealing with whiteboard. It's a good option to have, but it's not something that is versatile. I'm looking for something versatile. The powerful, versatile top ends are mostly in heroism. We saw Liberty, for example, being added, which I think is a really powerful card. Which I think is a very powerful card. But that's about it. Like we didn't really see any. Whenever I'm building a control deck in this format, I just don't know what to put in late game. Like it's really weird. Like if I'm playing Villainy, I just don't know what to put in late game. There's just no good. And I think those 2 problems means that I think I'm even worried that soft control might not even be a deck after rotation, or it's going to be a niche. So something that I kind of think my thinking process here is that it feels like control decks, and I'm not talking about hard control, I'm talking about control in general, soft control included, is going to be a niche deck. It's going to be a niche archetype, which is, in my view, completely outrageous because to me, there's 3 great archetypes in credit card games. I mean, there's 4 if you talk about combo, but ignoring combo, basically you got 3 main archetypes, which is mid-range, aggro, and control. And to me, one of those great archetypes here is not being properly there's a big chance that one of those big archetypes might not be represented after rotation, or at least it might be niche. We've been seeing since set 4 control decks keep declining set after set, and I think that FFG has not provided what control decks needs. Yes, we got board wipes, that no criticism about this. We got board wipes, there's no problem with that. But that's not enough. We also need good top ends, because if you wipe the board and then you can't play really anything after this, you're still gonna lose the game. You're just delaying the inevitable. And I think what is also very annoying is that a lot of people kind of like are very salty about control decks. They don't like playing in control. And I think one of the reasons is because FFG makes control boring. Like they give us all the board wipes, everything that delays the game, but they don't give us the cool top end. They don't give us the cool card that allows you to actually finish off games. So it's just death by 1,000 cuts. We had to use vigilance for 2 years now as a win condition because FFG simply doesn't want to give us real good late game win cards. So it's really annoying. So please, FFG, give us some real win condition from control. It's gonna make control so much more enjoyable to play with, but it's also gonna make it more enjoyable to play against, and give this archetype the love it deserves. I could be completely off base here. Maybe control is gonna be a thing, but I'm just a little bit worried that we're missing some really key ingredients. I believe that you'll be able to win tournaments with control if you take the meta by surprise, but I don't think control decks are going to be the deck to beat in after rotation. And once again, I'm not only talking about hard control, I'm talking about soft control in general. Moving on, there's no new good answers to space. Bamboozles and confiscates are rotating out, and countering pilot leaders is going to be very difficult if you're not playing blue or red, and even red is questionable. I mean, you got a couple of cards. You got Kiss Fist to Hydra Sprites and Constable. But if you're playing blue, you got a couple of good options. You got the 3 Remembers, and you got the Hyperspace Disasters and stuff. But if you're not playing one of these colors, you're gonna be very much scratching your head to know how you're gonna be dealing with those space aggro. I believe space aggro is gonna be very strong, and it's gonna be super obnoxious to play against because we simply just don't have the answers anymore. So that could be a very big problem. Finally, last and but not least, the problem, my last statement for this video, which is already way too long, is that legendaries are basically on the same level as set 4 and 5. So there's not a significant improvement. Lawless time should still sell well below MSRP. So the main issue I've talked about many times is that legendaries are not good enough, which means that there's no chase cards, and because there's no chase cards, there's no reason to buy booster box beyond the first two, which means that basically booster box sold very poorly because they sell very poorly. Local game store lose money on them because they lose money on them. They don't want to purchase more, and they give up on Star Wars Unlimited. And I think Star Wars Unlimited is doing great as a game because the game is awesome, the meta is great, but on the financial side of things, it's not doing great. Local game stores are losing money because nobody wants to buy booster box, because there's no reason to buy booster box in this game because there's nothing to chase. There's no real big cause to chase after. So I think this is something that FFG completely messed up with Star Wars Unlimited. Overall, they just keep on printing those very underwhelming legendaries. They nailed it out of the park on the first set, but then after they decided that for some reason legendaries would have to be just very average cards, if not just worse than the uncommons for some reason. And as a result, we ended up in that situation where the most expensive card of the last set is worth 10 quid. That is just the sad reality. Is like the most expensive card of Secrets of Power is Amidala, and she's worth 10 quid. That is not good for TCG for this to be the case. How can you expect, and booster box are selling for less than 50 quid, while they are supposed to be 110 euros MSRP. Unfortunately, I don't think this set is going to fix that. I don't think the legendaries in the set are good enough to fix that fundamental issue that Star Wars Unlimited is having. And I wonder if this is going to be the nail in the coffin for the game. I'm really scared about this, to be fair. So, yeah, that was my last statement. A little bit gloomy. Overall, I am excited for the new set. I think I'm more excited for rotation than I'm excited for the new set, but I think both combined together will provide for a brand new experience, and that's going to be super fun from a gameplay standpoint. Once again, on the gameplay side of things, I think the game is doing great. This is the financial side of things that I'm a little bit more worried about. Anyway, thank you so much for following my video, and for everybody who's been following me for this Lawless time first impression journey. I'll thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.